And welcome to the live stream in the build up to the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, the oldest race in the FIA World Championship calendar. Not the oldest race, of course, by any means, and we should never have any disservice paid to the drivers, the cars, the teams that competed prior to 1950, but certainly the opening round of the FIA World Championship was staged in 1950 at Silverstone. All credit should go to Earl Howe, a very quick racing driver of his time, who was also able to do a lot of lobbying with the British government to enable the King and Queen to attend that first British Grand Prix. And as a result of having that royalty there, he then basically gazumped the French, and the British Grand Prix got the title of being the first round of the championship, as distinct from the French Grand Prix, which historically really should have got it because they've been around longer than the British Grand Prix. But anyway, we won that one. Bit of a World Cup going on there. Anyway, welcome to the live stream wherever you are in the world and whatever time zone you're in. Good morning, good evening, good day. Very hot here in Spain. Got Dexter on the tiled floor over there. He's pretty good. We got air conditioning on here. You can see it, I think, bottom, what's it, this one here? Yeah, that one there. You can see the edge of the AC there. So luckily all the hot air is blowing out the other way. So hopefully there won't be too much on the live stream today. Okay, just to get us started, in the vein of Silverstone, I wanted to show you an image that a mate of mine sent me last night, actually. Recently remastered, AI'd everything. I think it's a David Phipps photograph of Jim Clark, 1967 British Grand Prix, Lotus 49. That's Beckett's as it used to be, a relatively tight right-hander. They went through Chapel, the left-hand kink, and then and it was like third gear from memory, right-hander. And then it was sort of acceleration through the kink down to hanger straight. And then obviously they changed all that. But anyway, there's Jim. And that's when the oil went down about halfway through the race. And he actually said to David Phipps, who I think took that picture and was one of my mentors. I think he said to David after, "Oh, did you enjoy that? I was putting on a bit of a show when the oil went down, just to give you guys a bit of something to talk about, something to take photos of." So there's Jim having fun when the oil went down in the 49. Absolute clarity, absolutely brilliant. However, this is the world of AI, and I just wanted to show you this just as a slight caution, really. We all know about AI and how it is incredibly helpful in so many ways, but it can also be quite damaging historically if they don't get the details correct. And here is exactly what I mean. If you look at that picture again, it looks great, doesn't it? Okay, let's look at the close-up now of Jimmy's helmet. There it is on the left. What is that on his peak? It's not even, I've gone as close as I can, it's not even legible. Actually, in the race, he had the Firestone logo, as you can see on the right-hand side. That's an actual photograph, non-AI doctored. You can see the red Firestone flags, checkered flags. And above that, above the white peak, the Buco helmet logo, which has been taken out of the AI picture. And also, in the middle of his peak is a third silver stud. The Buco helmet was like that. And in the AI one, they've just removed that silver stud and put some other logo, which is impossible to see anyway. His eyes don't look right either to me. So it was just, I'm not trying to, be a damp squib or anything. I'm just saying it's something we all know. Be very careful of AI, because I think we're going to see a lot of that, not only Formula One, but in so many walks of life. And I was astonished actually that they didn't take the trouble. Whoever was controlling the AI or feeding it with data didn't feed it with the data of, say, Buco helmets, who dominated the scene in '67 effectively. And indeed, there's something else actually as well. If we look at this, that's the remastered one. You don't, when you look at the windscreen, you don't think of anything other than, wow, look at all that detail behind the dash there. But I can tell you now, as you can see from the picture on the right, they actually had an orange tinted windscreen on the cars in 67, Formula 2 and Formula 1. Not every race, but Jimmy had it at the British Grand Prix. And why have they gone for a clear windscreen in that case? What's that all about? Please advise. Anyway, that's it. In the build up to the British Grand Prix, that's my input. Okay, let's get down to our questions, and I'm sure there'll be many of you asking questions and comments after that controversial. I call it controversial anyway. I'm not sure. Am I the only person out there who thought it was controversial that George got away with that? A and B, Austrian Grand Prix, and B, looking forward to Silverstone. So let's just have a look, see what everybody's thinking. This is from first in the queue, David Allen. Max should stay put at Red Bull. Yeah. Is anybody saying he shouldn't? I think there's a lot of sort of, gossip out there on the internet. They've got to have something to write about, haven't they? And let's make one thing clear. There isn't going to be a day when Max Verstappen isn't going to get a phone call from somebody saying, oh, Max, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to drive for us? So every team in the planet will be wanting him to drive for him. Why not? Why wouldn't they? He's the best guy in the world. Anyway, no need to leave. I agree. Build a great team with Ford. Not sure about Ford. Red Bull Powertrain, I think, is probably a little bit more opposite there. Get into the hyper car development for Le Mans. I see what you mean. Yeah, get into the whole thing with a proper branding thing, ambassador, brand ambassador, all that stuff. For Le Mans, I don't want to see Max go elsewhere and not win. Yeah, I mean, I think that's on the back of a bit of talk about McLaren being an option for him. Well, of course, it is an option for him if they, I don't know if the pennies dropped at McLaren and they realize they need, in addition to having at least one very good wide turn-in straight line braking driver, it might be helpful to have an early turn-in guy. And instead of going for somebody like, I don't know, Hadjar, very good example, who they didn't go for. Having said that, let's see a little bit more of Fornaroli, actually. Let's see what he's like. Anyway, they're going for Max. Well, they're talking to Max, I think. And from Max's point of view, if McLaren can get one of their, is it Bahrain? I don't know. It's one of those Middle Eastern countries. Get some of those guys to pay Max, I don't know, a couple of trillion, then maybe he'll do it. But in terms of like for like, Red Bull, McLaren, he's probably better off with the people he knows, right? Having said that, there's quite a lot of people he knows at McLaren now. Rob Marshall being a classic example, Pete Prod another. So yeah, I think that's what you're getting at, and I kind of agree with you. Well, I definitely agree with you. Why change just to do that? Jim Honts says the ridiculous, and a member too. Thank you very much, Jim. Great to have your support on the channel. And just as a reminder, if you haven't joined, I hope and I think we're actually able to give members a nice little bolt-on to everything we do on the channel. A couple of bolt-ons, actually. One is that we do live chat during the race, which I think I'm getting better at as time goes on, hopefully. It's more about technology than it is about me, but it's also me too. But we do that every race, about half an hour before the start. So if you want to be a part of that, love to have you on board. A, and B, we do quite a lot of videos and stuff for members, either coming out a little bit earlier and then making it public, and or specifically for members. So yeah, that's good. So just to say, the ridiculous yellow flag rules certainly need reevaluation. The FIA bigwigs need to be taken into a room and shown the Tom Price accident from the 77 South African Grand Prix. Yellow should make sure that safety issues are paramount. With so little time left in last Saturday's qualifying, a red should have been thrown immediately after Max went off at high speed. Well, you're just echoing my thoughts, everything I said in the video and have said since on Cam Chat on Monday. Absolutely, totally agree. And for George Russell, in his position in the sport as the driver's representative, the GPDA, whatever the title is, to be splitting hairs after somebody's gone off at 300 kilometers an hour on a downhill plunge, approached by a blind brow, and splitting hairs as to whether it was a single yellow or a double, and quite clearly it should have been a red anyway, to me is just ridiculous. And I think, as I said in the Cam Chat thing, we're talking to Cameron, the best thing George could do now would be to say, as the drivers represented on the GPDA, I do think we need to make changes. Yes, I got away with it. I actually narrowed the gap between the rules and safety, but I managed to squeeze through it and I got away with it and I won the race, and that's fair enough. But at the end of the day, that sort of thing shouldn't happen, and we need to do something about it. Certainly, just to say a single yellow requires the driver to be able to change direction is so grey in its area as to be absurd. Why doesn't it define what types of corner, approach speed, everything else, weather conditions, and beyond that, what is changing direction anyway? As I say, I defy George, and I've just been watching it again, that he had no knowledge of the max thing until he got to that blind brow approaching the Jochen curve. And it was only as he was actually going past the accident site that he got a radio message saying Max has gone off. So he had no knowledge of what was going on, apart from just lights, obviously, and then seeing debris and dust, I guess. And there's no way in the world he could have changed direction suddenly if, as you correctly say, potentially a Tom Price situation again when a marshal ran across the track, or a Stefan Johansson situation when there was a wild animal on the track. And you could say, well, wouldn't have been much left of it by the time Max had hit it. Well, maybe Max went off trying to avoid the accident. Who knows? Who knows what could have happened? So I'll tell you one person who didn't know. That was George Russell. He had no idea what was going on the other side of that blind brow at 315 kilometers an hour. Oh, but it was a single yellow. I only had to lift in a lift and coast zone anyway. I mean, and he still got the pole. He's going quick enough still to get the pole. I mean, I think he's quite proud that he did get the pole. I say that's absolutely makes it worse, to be honest, because it just shows how little he did back off. Anyway, thanks for that, Jim. Appreciate it. Jim has just put up a very nice message here as well, which is a super chat in addition. Thank you very much, Jim. Really appreciate that. Very nice. Yeah, that's okay. This is from Bahabish. Babish. I'm just going to give you Babish. Weirdly, Aramco ratings say George drove better than Kimi and Max. What are Aramco ratings? Is that according to Aston Martin or something? What do you think? Why did Red Bull pick the weird start? The weird strat. Massive fan and grateful for your insights. Well, there's no way. I mean, George drove quite well in the race, didn't he? He got enough gap to be able to withstand pressure at all stages of the race, and he nursed his hard tires on quite a long finishing stint. Did well. I don't think Max and Red Bull had a weird strategy. I had this chat with Cameron. My take on that then and now is I don't think he was very comfortable on the mediums anyway. And I think at that stage of the race, Red Bull, for once, I think they made a conscious decision to be relatively conservative on the basis that they had half a chance of finishing second in that race, or maybe even third. I don't think they were thinking, oh, we got a great car here, we can aggressively beat George Russell here. I mean, bear in mind where they've come from this year. Bear in mind what happened on Saturday. P2, an unbelievable result for Max and Red Bull. And that's how I saw it. I think they correctly went into a slightly conservative mode, didn't put him back onto mediums again. I knew he had a new set. I think it was the right call. Given those circumstances, I think P2, for him to still beat Kimi, amazing result. So, you got McLaren putting out press releases saying, "Oh, we're so happy we beat one of the Ferraris." Give me a break, But Max can genuinely be proud of the. Proud's the wrong word. I don't think he's a proud man. I think he's a dignified man, and I think he can be justifiably happy with the result. So, yeah, I think that's what I think about that. So Ross Soman, another of our members. Thank you so much, Sir Ross. Peter, what would your advice? You're not on the poll today, Sir Ross. What's going on? What would your advice to Leclerc be? He looks lost. Sessions with Rob. I think Rob's doing his operation at the moment, so I'm not sure Rob could do much to help Charles either now. A bit too late for all that. In Charles' case, hopefully not Rob's case. Yeah, well, I've said, what I think about that. I think the worst mistake he can make is to start changing any of the fundamentals around his cockpit, which includes brakes. And I think he just needs to just work on being Charles Leclerc with all his lovely, soft, deft, subtle touches and basic suppleness that he has in his hands and his feet and his feel for the surface of the road. Don't touch any of that, but just do what Lewis did in 2022 and just start to extend the straights a little bit. Don't rely so much on the front of the car. But whatever you're doing, just make sure you keep everything very soft. And at the moment, it seems to my eye that whenever he does try to drive a bit more like Lewis does, a little bit longer in the straights, still relatively early turning, but not in the way Charles used to do it, he tends to get more spiky with his driving. And that's why I think he's making the tires go off more than Lewis's, and he still has issues with the braking. So it's quite a difficult mix and match, but quite clearly, the way Lewis is driving the Ferrari now is the only way to drive the Ferrari as it is right now. I mean, they may well get a much bigger sweet spot in terms of downforce and grip as the season progresses, maybe even at Silverstone, we'll see. But as it is right now, it's a car that needs to be driven exactly as the way Lewis Hamilton's driving it, because Lewis is getting the best from the car, no doubt about that. And and Charles isn't doing that. He's trying to do it, but in doing it, a little bit like Lewis when he started doing it, going to wider entries in 22, a few lockups and moments because everything's a bit more spiky for him. And the problem with that style of driving is that when you do have him make an error, braking too late or whatever it is, turning in a little bit too sharply once you've extended the straight, then, once you've extended the braking area, get it correct, the results are usually worse because you're right on the edge. You don't have that sort of sweet spot that Charles used to driving around, all those variables you get when you're driving with the front of the car, and you can adjust it with the pedals and the steering and the throttle and the brakes. You can do all that. But when you're doing it just like, I'm going to brake as late as I can in a straight line, and then I get on the power as soon as I can, turning in late, there's not much margin for error if something goes wrong. And I think that's something else that Charles never had to face before. So what would be my advice to Charles? Whatever you do, put the brakes back on, because I think you need the Brembos. I think he needs a softer pedal, softer feel. And I think he just needs to just try gradually extending his braking areas a bit in a straight line. So yeah, and Silverstone. Let's think about Charles around Silverstone. I mean, into that tight left-hander before the first long straight, I suspect Lewis will have him there, and he'll just do a better job over the weekend through that left-hander. Then you go down into the next section, that tight section. I think Lewis will be better there as well. They'll be pretty similar, I suspect, through Copse, Beckett's, Stowe, and then I think all the slowish bits, Lewis will have Charles. Charles will get impatient with the whole thing as well, probably. Anyway, I hope not. I'd love to see him back again. But if I was advising Charles now, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd say go back to the brake setup you're used to running, because it's the most fundamental thing for a driver, the brake pedal, more even than the throttle response, in my opinion, and working with drivers over the years. And if you don't have the brake pedal feel that it is just part of your DNA, then you're always going to be in trouble. And I think that's where at the moment he's struggling. Go back to the Brembos, in my opinion. Sarosh again. Peter, are there drivers in your experience that have gone from short corners to long corners? Well, Hamilton, longish. Charles Leclerc, just been saying he should do it. Piastri currently. I feel that Leclerc is all going down that path. Yeah, yeah. No, I can't. I mean, I think what Lewis did was unique. I've never seen a driver do that. I'm just trying to think. Um, Anybody that I would put in that category. I can't think of anybody who did go that way. When drivers have gone off the boil, let's say Jody Scheckter in 1980, good example. He was not a short corner driver anyway. He was quite late apex, oversteery, very good, very good. But he was never a short corner driver anyway. No, I think it's an unusual thing. I think that's why Lewis, A, should be given credit for doing it, and B, it took him quite a long time to get to where he is, isn't it? Right, it's a couple of years really, if you think about it, and it's a difficult thing to do. Piastri, I think he's just kind of given up, isn't he? He's just got so psyched out by Lando's telemetry and trying to do the Lando lap a little bit better than Lando, that he's lost his way completely as to what Oscar could have brought to the table in a different style, which is the style he brought to McLaren when he went there. He was phenomenally good, Oscar. And there's not much chat about Oscar these days, is there? But if you rewind 2 years, I mean, Oscar was the man of the moment. And oh yeah, of course McLaren had to get Oscar first opportunity. Let's sign him. He's brilliant. He's this. He's that. How many people are saying that today? And why? Why are they not saying that today? Because he's not really driving the way Oscar used to drive. Yeah, he did a good job in Austria, but how do you quantify that? I mean, Lando was just slow, wasn't he? Okay, he didn't have the best of the strategy, but he wasn't quick throughout the race. And Oscar did a pretty good job, but McLaren should be much further up the race order than that. Ronnie Way, hi Peter. Strange the FIA did not review the single yellow crash in Austria on safety grounds as well. There's no GPDA representative statement on it. Dangerous precedent. Also, who will shine in Silverstone? Yeah, well, there were so many dangerous precedents in that accident at Austria. I've kind of lost count already. As I say, the best thing and the correct thing to happen now would be for George Russell himself to say, I shouldn't have done what I did. I got away with it. It was legally correct, and I acted on reflex, and I got the pole, and I won the race. Okay, but I realize now when I think about it that it was that sort of thing should not be allowed to happen. And we've got loopholes there, and we need to rewrite the rules. We need to revisit the whole situation. And it starts with potentially the FIA, why they didn't just press a red flag button immediately and all this faffing around with single or double yellows. And then beyond that, if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty and split hairs, defining what change of direction means and why it doesn't take into account different types of corners and different speeds and different approaches and different weather conditions. All those factors need to be talked about. And I fear, because nobody got hurt, luckily, and George has won the race, and now we're moving on to Silverstone, it's a double header, it'll all be very quickly forgotten and nothing will happen. Like most things in Formula One, that's the problem. So, all one can do is point out the obvious, which is that that should not have happened. The fact that George got away with that was wrong. I'm not saying he should have been penalized, because he technically, I suppose, did the right thing. But the fact that he could technically do the right thing and get away with doing what he did and going past the crash site at over 300 clicks, forget it. Not over 300. Sorry, going past the crash site slightly quicker than he had on his previous quickest lap. And the stats are there. He did that, and so yep, he did the big lift in a lift and coast zone. Jez James, I knew someone would come up and annoy me with this question. Fair enough too, Jez. About time somebody gave me some stick. Last year you seemed quite convinced about a new car winning. This year you're now saying money doesn't talk. I'm interested to know why you didn't think of that in the first place. Yeah, it's a very good question, because actually, if you look back, and not that anybody ever would bother to do this, so you look back through my writings and all the videos I've ever done, I've always said the best way to grow a team is organically, not by pouring money at it and trying to buy the best of this and buy the best of that. And I've never changed my tune on that. And I've always said, if you read between the lines, that I think the way Lawrence Stroll and Lance Stroll go about their motor racing is completely wrong, because there's nothing organic about it. And it's very indulgent as well. Now, if you then factor in they've got Adrian Newey, my thinking was, having said that, even Adrian Newey is quite capable of bypassing that whole lack of organic growth thing and will do a very good car. There's no way Adrian will not do a good car for Aston Martin. I just took that as a given. And I still don't know if I'm right or wrong about that. I still don't know if that is a good car or not. But what I would say is that I think I was wrong in not anticipating, well, and I thought in harness with Andy Cowell looking after Honda, it was almost a no-brainer that this would defy everything we've ever said about organic growth, and it would be a very quick car. And of course, what I never anticipated was that Andy Cowell didn't stay on top of Honda, and that Adrian Newey, when he started working for the team, didn't stay on top of Honda, and that there was chaotic management there, quite obviously, with nobody really doing the important work. And I suppose I should have filtered in the inadequacy there of somebody like Lawrence Stroll as a team principal who actually knows how to run a team, as distinct from own a team. He's very, very good at owning a team and getting the money, but is actually how to run a team. As I've said many times, if it was your team or my team and we were going to Honda engines, we would surely have looked at the way Honda began their final career with McLaren, and say, well, we won't let that happen again. Well, if they're going to do the engine in Japan, which inevitably they're going to have to, we're going to have an outpost there right by the factory, and we're going to have Andy Cowell there 24/7 with his team of guys, making sure Honda are absolutely on the straight and narrow. That's what I think I would have done. And I guess looking back now, I misjudged that side of things. I just assumed, I guess I just assumed that it would happen in the normal way that you make sure a car's on the weight limit and passes its crash tests. You would just assume that with Andy Cowell there, that they would be on top of Honda. And that is the problem. You know, they've let Honda get out of control in terms of their battery development or vibration or heat, whatever it is, we still don't really know. But whatever happened should not have happened and probably wouldn't have happened had Andy Cowell had a proper setup there in Japan working alongside Honda. And that's where I went wrong. So sorry about that. You know, the jury is still out, just I think, on whether that is a diabolically bad car or not. We'll have to wait and see. No, well, we've been waiting so long. I think I have to concede, Jez, that you are right. And why didn't I think of that in the first place? Well, just to recap on that, I just assumed that, you know, being on top of Honda was such an obvious thing that it never occurred to me that they wouldn't do it. That's how I didn't think of that in the first place. Hope you're clear about that one. Another one from Jez, probably giving me a hard time again. Apart from getting their foot in the door, do you think a true Formula One driver would ever want to be a number two driver, given drivers are so single-minded and motivated by the dream of winning a championship? Well, any driver with a brain would, yeah, of course. Depends on the team, of course. But you know, I had this conversation with both Rubens and Felipe Massa when they were leaving Ferrari, saying, and Daniel Ricciardo for that matter. I'm not sure I've had a conversation with him about it. I did with a couple of people he worked with, and it was, you know, if you're a number two driver in a very good team, Red Bull when they're very good, or Ferrari when they're very good, you are by the law of averages, A, going to win Grand Prix, and B, everyone knows that you're the number two and you can do a very, very good job alongside the number one. So those are the plus sides of that situation. The downside is if there's a championship to be won, inevitably it'll be won by the number one driver. If you then, as Rubens did, as Felipe Massa did, as Daniel Ricciardo did, go to a lesser team in order to be number one, it always ends in tears. It never works because the lesser team is a lesser team, not because it doesn't have you as a driver. It's a lesser team because they don't do the job as well. And you go there with your experience as the number two at Red Bull or number two at Ferrari, and it doesn't mean anything, as we saw from the careers, therefore, of Daniel Ricciardo, Rubens Barrichello, and Felipe Massa. You know, all that experience they brought to those teams. I mean, Rubens got blown away by Jensen at BAR and then no real impact at Williams. Same with Felipe at Williams. And Daniel, you know, just downhill from there, really, wasn't it? So, of course, I think it's better to be in that situation. If you're a very young driver, like as Isaac Hadjar, and you've got Nico Rosberg saying, don't go there, and the number two driver to Max and Red Bull, you know, you'll never get the same equipment as Max. They'll always favor Max. The intelligent response is, well, that's what I want. That's what I want to see. I want to learn from that. I want to learn from Max. And one day I want to be as good as Max. And I want to go there as the number two at Red Bull because they're a very, very good racing team. And I want to get the best from them. That's the intelligent response. And he did the right thing. It's exactly how Isaac responded. That's why he's going well. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's all the way back through history. Look at Jackie Stewart when he was at BRM. Graham Hill was already a world champion, and Jackie joined as a young number two to Graham Hill, blew him away. And there you go. You know, it's a very good yardstick. You know, that's the other thing. If you're Nigel Mansell and you finally get a chance in '85 to join Williams, and it's Keke Rosberg is already a world champion, or Nelson Piquet then is a world champion, and you go quicker than they are, that does a lot for your status. So yes, 100%. I would always say, you know, it depends on the team, obviously, but if it's a winning team, very good team, always better to be a number two there than a number one in a mediocre team. Sarosh again. Hi, Sarosh. Peter, can you clarify as to how Verstappen is able to manage energy deployment better than Leclerc? Both turn in on the brakes, but somehow Leclerc reaches super clipping most of the time. I can't, no, because obviously they're different power units. One of them's a Red Bull powertrain, Ford, and the other's a Ferrari. So I think what you need to do is compare Leclerc with Hamilton and see what Lewis is doing more efficiently than Charles and how he does it. And I'm not good enough on this stuff. You know, even though I listen for it, I find it all quite, I don't know what, just a sort of grey fuzz of noise of who's doing a better job of the super clipping, Leclerc or Hamilton. Within one clip, it's quite difficult to tell that, isn't it? So I can't say. The only thing I would say is that Max, to my eye, is not blaming anything on the car. He's actually just refining his driving around the limits of what the team are giving him for power deployment. And we saw a good example of that in Austria, where they quite clearly wanted him to run first gear coming out of turn 3 or in the middle of turn 3. And Max tried it and said, no, I don't like it, and stayed in second for the qualifying runs with light fuel runs. And I think that's, yeah, that's to Max's credit, because he's finding a way of driving the car in second where he's just got a little bit more fluidity and a little bit more momentum into the corner, which is enabling him not really to suffer any problem with power deployment or power harvesting, and keep the car a little bit more as he wants the field to be, and using the tires less as a result. And I think it's quite difficult for Charles. It's more difficult for Charles to do that at Ferrari, because he's got Lewis doing a very good job in the other car, kind of setting the pace this year of how to juggle the problems of power management with how to drive the car quickly and preserve the tires as much as possible. And that's because he's got Lewis doing that. It's very difficult for Charles to say, nah, I want to run second gear at turn 3, because imagine what happened if he did that and he wasn't any quicker or slower even. Oh well, you're not listening to us, whatever. And but that doesn't happen at Red Bull. So I think some of it is that, and that's one point of the Austrian circuit that I was able to discover. But I'm sure there are other examples where Max is doing a similar thing. He's starting to adapt this sort of straitjacket of how you have to drive the car with its deployment, with what he knows he can do with a car if he's in the zone and he's not really thinking about it and he's just trying to feel the surface of the road and juggling all the dynamic weights. And that's something he's doing incredibly well. It's a new frontier for him in terms of what he's got to do in the cockpit, a completely new thing. And he's probably, as a result of the last couple of races, but certainly Austria, he's probably thinking, yeah, this is a challenge. This is as much of a challenge as if I went to Mercedes and I had Kimi Antonelli in the other car, actually trying to drive a Red Bull, which has got quite a small sweet spot anyway, in a way that works, plus harvesting the power correctly. Not easy. And he's doing it. And he's doing it well, because Isaac Hadjar is kind of doing what he's doing, although he didn't go to second gear for turn 3. But Arvid Lindblad did. Interesting. So, yeah, I think it's that, Maury. I think, Charles is very confused at the moment also, because if you throw in on top of all that, oh, well, if you put Lewis's brake friction material in the carbon industry, it'll be better, Charles. And he's obviously finding it different. And they're probably less heat sensitive in terms of ups and downs, but he's probably got less feel through the brake pedal now as well. So again, it's a different situation for him, because Lewis is setting the pace and Charles in the sort of turbulence of that pace, whereas Max is pioneering new ground for Red Bull. And most of it, typically Max is working because he knows what he needs and what he can do. Hope that kind of explains it. Sri and Rathan. Hi, Peter. Imagine you're with Lewis and Max. Looks like I've just lost the thing over here. I'll just reboot it. I think, I don't know what happened. Just said suddenly, sorry, the whole thing went. Just give me 2 seconds while I reboot this live chat. Oops. Sorry about this. Be with you in a second. Hopefully this is just some sort of internet glitch that yeah, I think it should be all right. Oof, a lot of questions. So we're on this one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry about all that. The internet just suddenly went down and then restarted, and hopefully we got a picture here, A and B. I think the live chat, I've had to reboot the live chat with a different code, but it seems to be okay. All right, the next question looks to be quite a good question too. Yeah, from Serena. Serena Yan. There you go. Hi, Peter. Imagine you're with Lewis and Max having a coffee in a cafe. What would be your most anticipated question to ask them as a person and as a multiple world champion? They're both together, right? Having a coffee. Well, I could say, you know, what sort of coffee do you like? And hopefully I get a response, as distinct from a stared blank face from Paul de Resta that I got when I asked if he, well, I don't know. I just asked him about his coffee taste, and he just looked at me as if I was mad. Anyway, what would I ask them? The one thing I'd be interested to know is if they've either of them have ever made a mistake when they're starting a qualifying lap and they've started the lap before the timing line at the wrong place and not gone across the timing line exactly as quickly as they wanted to be. They've ever done that? I'm interested to know. That's the first thing I'd ask. Secondly, I would yeah, I suppose when I'd ask Lewis, when you're following Max, what are you thinking, Lewis? And vice versa. I suppose it would be that. Those then that would lead on to quite a lot of, you know, I think quite a lot of banter, wouldn't it? Well, good-hearted banter between the two of them. And then I don't know. I suppose favorite corners. Yeah, favorite corners, track conditions for those corners. The best feeling they've ever had in a racing car in terms of a corner and load. And if they honestly put their hands on their heart, how many times would they say they've actually driven the perfect lap, one single lap? And I suspect both of them would say, no, I've never done it. I would imagine that would be the answer, because both of them are so good and so honest that they would say that. So it'd be an interesting thing though, wouldn't it? It'd be very good. Quite like to do that. Yeah, good idea. If you can set that up, we'll go and do it. Alessandra. Hi, Peter. Hi. Hi, Alessandra. Thanks to your brilliant insight and the amazing content on your channel, I've become a huge Leclerc fan. I'm now heading to Silverstone. Please give me some hope. Well, yeah, okay. Of course, Charles will, whatever situation he's in, whether he's just still using the carbon industry brakes, whether he's finding the car a little bit difficult in terms of turn in, he doesn't have the front end that he wants, or maybe he's using the tires a little bit more than Lewis and he's not quite as quick on the fourth lap of the fuel run on Friday afternoon or whatever it is, he will be getting better. Whatever these issues are, he will be getting better with every race. Have no doubt about that. And whatever the reachable, attainable target is, Charles will get there. And he'll get there pretty quickly because he's an incredibly talented, intelligent driver. And he may well be up there with Lewis around Silverstone. He may well be. So I think you need to just relax and enjoy. He might have the odd lock up and the odd moment, but I think he'll be enjoying being quick at Silverstone when Lewis is obviously going to be quick, if you see what I mean. You know, if he kind of, he'll be thinking, oh, it's going to really annoy Lewis if I out qualify him by a 10th, isn't it? So I think we watch all that and enjoy. And it depends how good the Ferrari is. I mean, if you're a Ferrari fan, you could be saying, and you're a Charles Leclerc fan, you could be saying, well, you know, obviously it was much too hot in Austria. Silverstone should be much better for them, for tyres. So Ferrari will be a lot more competitive, be just like Barcelona. So go in thinking that, then you'll enjoy your drive to Silverstone on Friday morning anyway. Speaking of the weather, I see again, they just can't resist it, can they, at McLaren? They're again talking about, you know, when the changeable weather we're expecting at Silverstone. I thought, oh, so I've immediately got on the app again, the weather, And sure enough, Friday, Saturday, both sunshine. Sunday at the moment, just cloud, no rain predicted at all. But I'm sure McLaren will be going there with full wet setups in the garage just to whack on the car as soon as they can, desperate to show that they're so brilliant on intermediates. It's got to laugh, haven't you? Srinya again. Sorry, Srinanyan Rathan. Sorry about that. And can you comment on the concentration level, zone, mental energy the great drivers distribute when they're leading a race? Well, yeah, I was on the live chat. I was um, I was hoping that the TV cameras would stay on both Kimi and Max when they took their helmets off in Parc Ferme, because I was really interested to see how wet their hair was, if at all, and how many veins were popping on their foreheads, and if it looked as if their pulse rate had been above about 70. And they did actually. They stayed with it for a change, which was nice. And they, yeah, there was a little bit of moisture in the hair, but not much. And the veins on the forehead were definitely not Monaco spec, and they look pretty relaxed and calm. And I think that is the case. I think the drivers physically are just as fit as you as an athlete needs to be in that situation, unbelievably fit. B, they've got the cooling suits, which obviously work very, very well. C, it is part jet pilot, part racing driver these days. And a lot of it is, okay, this mode, this strat, and that kind of directs your train of thought and your emotion in a way that those distractions were never able to do in previous eras because they didn't exist. So, if you're Isaac Hadjar and you're having a bit of a rant at your engineer because you don't like the understeer in the middle of turn one, actually the engineer has now got lots of ways of diffusing that. And that is, so I'm just going to lift this a bit just in case the audio is dropping off. And that is to say, strat 3, Isaac, strat 3, power off, whatever they say, and recharge off. And he immediately thinks, oh, yeah, this button here. And he stopped the rant. So I think actually there's all of those things around them now make it much easier to be a very calm, lucidly thinking racing driver, even if you're a sort of a natural firebrand like Carlos Sainz or Liam Lawson. You still have to do all that boring stuff, don't you? And so I think that's how a lot of them just stay in a zone. And it also, if you look at that picture of Jim Clark, what we should be looking at earlier, Jim always used to say that his biggest fear was, or his biggest rival was concentration, just staying focused throughout a Grand Prix distance, particularly if he was leading the race from start to finish and pulling away from the opposition, lapping it almost. That his concentration was the thing he had to work on most. And I don't think that's the case today, because there's so much going on with the management of the tires, the engine, the lap, other cars. And I was thinking today, and I'm sure I never asked Mark this really, but I'm sure Mark Slade, I'm sure one of the reasons great engineers like Mark Slade just eventually decide they've had enough of Formula One is because they end up being air traffic controllers more than they are running a race car and a driver. So you're 3 seconds at Piastri, you got 5 seconds to Ocon. It's just all that stuff. That as soon as they go out, they just start this rolling commentary where everybody is on the track, which is all very clever and very good, and it's all sat nav and all that stuff. But it is, and in that sense, you don't have a concentration problem, because the minute you have finished doing your recharge off, you're getting a message saying that you've got 5 seconds, you're going to be catching a back marker or whatever. So there's I don't think concentration's a problem. Mental energy, I think the engineers these days ensure that the mental energy is pretty much spent in their direction in running the car and running the race. And yes, obviously drivers like Max, I wouldn't say Charles at the moment, but certainly drivers like Max, Lewis now probably more than Charles, um, have, because they have this sort of their baseline of how they operate the car, let's say it's at 80% of what they do as a human being, physical athlete, that means they've got 20% basically to play around with their mind, and what, thinking about strategy or the guy behind, or how he's going to pass the guy in front. And that kind of stays pretty constant because they're so good at managing the car up to that 80% level. It's what they do. Whereas a spikier driver is going to have spikes that go well above 80. Some are going to go to 100. Some of it's going to go to 92 in terms of, oh, there's a big moment. Oh, the oil, whatever, and they're correcting it. I better back off slightly for the next lap. Make sure I don't lock up the inside front. All that stuff starts to eat up. And those drivers don't have as much mental capacity as a Max does, because none of those things are a surprise for Max. They're all things that are just variables that he's playing with all the time. Whereas it is a surprise if you're trying to brake as late as possible into turn one and you suddenly lock the inside front and you think, oh, next lap I have to brake half a meter early or whatever it is. That's when the spikes occur. And if your inputs are less commensurate with the dynamic weights of the car, and your rates of input are out of harmony a little bit with those energies from the car, that is also going to use up more of your mental capacity. It'll have a mental effect as well, because you're driving on reflexes then, and you're having to allow the body to be ready, and you might get a little bit of the shadow boxing with the steering and getting ready to hold the slide and all that stuff. It's a fascinating subject, but I hope that kind of scratches the surface of it a little bit. Drew, Kimi was a disaster first few laps. The guy was off-roading more than Ogier. Well, Ogier was the only guy that didn't do much off-roading, wasn't he? He was, it was just like Jackie Stewart after the 72 French Grand Prix. Oh, I know the way to avoid the flint and not get a puncture. I drove around the stones. Yeah, I always used to make Carlos last that. And Ogier, didn't get the punctures that Terry got. Mind you, he did get a puncture in wherever it was, Portugal, and Terry didn't. Anyway, having said all that, Kimi disaster, yeah, kind of, but he did it very cleanly, didn't he? Didn't run into anybody. And when he was doing that, it was like, oh, no, let it go, bang, on. No penalties, and stayed out of trouble. It would have been much worse if he'd hit something and or incurred a penalty, or had to, all those other things that can happen. And he did it really well on a tight, silly racetrack, dare I say it, certainly for lap one. And remember I was saying going into that race, it's a sort of street fighters race where it's designed for first corner shunts, third corner shunts, T3 shunts, sorry, turn three shunts. And the key to Austria to some extent is surviving those first few laps. And where he was on the grid, P4, Kimi was quite right to be thinking, above all, I'm going to make sure my car doesn't get run into by anybody. And he probably looked quite hard in a sort of Ayrton Senna-like way long before the race as to how he could do that, just to make sure he was away from everybody and not getting hit. And I think that showed a lot of maturity, again, a lot of planning before the race. And I think I've mentioned this before, even in Formula 3 days, I would see Ayrton down at the start finish line watching the flag procedure to see if there's any pattern in the early races of the day and the way the marshal started the race, and if he could gain any advantage there and learn from everything he possibly could, watching other races and other things going on. And I'm sure Kimi has got a similar attitude. I'm sure he does. I think that's why you saw that in those first couple of laps. I think that was all. I'm not saying he definitely planned to do that, but he was just thinking, if I need to and I feel uncomfortable, I've got Piastri or somebody inside me, if I just flick the steering to the left, where is the best place to do that so I don't damage the floor? And how big a radius corner is that going to be? Am I going to be able to stay on the power? All those little details, he probably did all that stuff beforehand. And of course, he wouldn't talk about that. And I suppose when he was doing that, maybe even walk the track doing it. I don't know. But if he did, it would have been long after everybody had gone home. And I give him full credit, actually, for doing all that in quite a neat and tidy way and not getting run into and finishing third in a race where, it could quite easily have ended on turn three, lap one. Drew, again, Peter, probably a dumb question, but do team principals care about their drivers winning the Drivers' Championship as long as they can win the World Constructors' Championship? Job done. Who cares who wins, right? Peter, great show. Thank you. Depends on the team, depends on the team principal, really, doesn't it? How much of a businessman they are, how much of a racer they are. Yeah, I mean, Frank Williams would always have said in my day, Constructors' Championship's very important. Got to focus on the Constructors' Championship. And he always said that because he knew everybody only cared about the Drivers' Championship. And indeed, only he cared about the Drivers' Championship as well. So he kept saying the opposite just to try and convince himself of how important the constructors were. But of course, winning the Drivers' Championship is the most important thing. I mean, if you're I wouldn't say a Zach, because I think he's a bit of a racer, but I can see a lot of political team principals who think in terms of EBITDA, which is earnings before interest or some rubbish, or you're in any way worried about the stakeholders on Wall Street or anywhere else for that matter, you are always going to be thinking constructors equally as important as the drivers. But if you're a proper racer and you love racing, of course the drivers is what it's all about. Um, in fact, you go so far, if you're a real racer, you don't even think about the championship at all, and you become Sterling Moss, and that's good too, isn't it? And that's why, drivers like Clark, he didn't win the championship that year in '67. Look how well he was driving, and just in that one corner you can tell how good the guy was. He didn't win the championship that year because the Lotus 49 was unreliable. He won 4 races to Denny Holmes 2, and Denny won the championship. But Jimmy didn't complain, but he just thought, well, championship's just points, it's not that big a deal. I won the most races and I was quick. I'm going to enjoy my farming now. you know, that nobody took. Nowadays, it's all so serious, isn't it? Well, is it serious? I don't know. Maybe it's even less serious than it was. It's comical almost. Um, Aaron, hey Peter, how would the art skill of driving an F car change with more or fewer gears, e.g., 5 gears or 10 gears? What about the Williams CBT? Yeah, well, it depends how you're changing gear, doesn't it, really? What we need is 10-speed manual H pattern gearbox, double H pattern. That would get them sorted, wouldn't it? But in terms of the art of driving, if it's a seamless shift, I don't think it makes any difference at all, does it? Whether it's 8, 10, 6, if it is what it is, and you basically got the hands on the steering wheel and where you go. A Williams CBT, yeah, it would have been very, very good. Very good. And it was banned by Bernie's Hockenheim Agreement of '93, which came into force in '94. So that was a big drama. And it would have been good. We have had CBT in motor racing. Of course, DAF, very, very variomatic transmission, which Jack Brabham actually drove the Formula 3 car fitted with the DAF belt system, but it was a bit sort of weird. And of course, the Chaparral was automatic as well. I think it was only 2-speed when it first came out. So it doesn't make a lot of difference, providing you got power and torque. And obviously, the art of changing gear is something that's gone away. I'd love to see it come back. I'd love to see onboards of Max changing gear with his right hand and combined with the footwell area shots of the clutch and everything. Wouldn't it be amazing? And then you could compare synchronicity between the drivers, but I don't think we'll ever do that. They hate going back in Formula One. I mean, we should be running active ride right now, shouldn't we? But we're not. Backward step. Had that. Banned it. Let's not go back. Billadelli, why do you think that over the season George will win the championship and not Kimi? George was not convincing in Austria, and it wasn't for Max's shunt. Kimi would have gotten pole, pole. Yeah, you're right. I'd say 1%, no, probably a larger percent. I won't say how much of the percentage is the Rob Walker percent of betting against yourself in order not to be too upset when it doesn't go your way. I'd love to see Kimi win the championship now, especially after Austria. I don't know. I keep saying my gut feeling. I suppose my gut feeling is that George, he's won a lot of championships, a lot of races. He knows the team backwards. He is quick. He's, you know, it's going to be very difficult for Kimi to keep up this level, I suppose, is what I'm really thinking throughout the rest of the year. I hope he does. I really hope he does. And based on what we're seeing at the moment, you got to think he will. But I just think George, he's just got so much road dust on him, hasn't he? And that road dust becomes more important as the championship year tightens and your key rival is your teammate in the identical car. I think that road dust gives you a certain gravitas to your driving, to your presence, to your understanding of how things are going to go that a rookie can never have. That's all I think, really. Not very logical, but nice. Another chat here from Yahoo. Thank you very much. Hi, Peter. I wondered if you think a lot of the Ferrari innovative thinking this year are down to the hiring of Loic Serra. I think people forget he arrived with Lewis from Mercedes. Yeah, maybe. I mean, we're talking about the rear wing. what else are we thinking? You know, the DRS thing with the rear wing. I'm not sure how much of an advantage that is. I mean, where is that going to be? Where is that an advantage? In top speed or giving them more downforce with less drag later on? I'm not quite sure. Or is it only, I just don't know. I mean, Ferrari, I think, have, I think Ferrari, sorry, I should have put that one up. I think Ferrari have benefited from the combustion chamber thing twofold. One, it seems to have hurt Mercedes a little bit and not Ferrari, as per Spain. And I think Ferrari have obviously got upgrades, more upgrades than Mercedes. So to their ice. A lot of talk at the moment how Ferrari was slow in a straight line in Austria. I think that's premature. Let's wait and see how slow they are in, if they are slow in Silverstone. And furthermore, I think the parameters around which we judge whether a car is quick in a straight line and therefore has a very good engine have completely changed. And it's too easy to rush to judgment based on top speeds at the moment. There's a lot of other factors. You know, suddenly you get George doing a 321 and everybody else is doing 308. Well, Mercedes must be unbelievably quick. Yeah, but you know, there's super clipping going on. There's all sorts of things going on. And where they put the speed trap is sometimes spurious in terms of the results we get. So I'm a believer in the Ferrari engine right now, to be honest. I think it's a good engine. I think it's one thing they've got that's very good. What was shocking to me was how bad they were with fuel on the car in Austria. And as I say, you know, maybe it was just the perfect storm of Ferrari's roll centers, weight distribution versus the ambient temperature versus the compound of the Pirellis, and it was all just horrendous for them in Austria. And they'll be pretty good in Silverstone. Let's wait and see. It was only one race, but they were bad on fuel. But they were very good in Spain. So you know, let's wait and see. I think it's still a long way to go. But yeah, like I think obviously doing a very good job, and he must have found it quite irritating. I would have thought a number of people going on, like me, going on about Adrian would have been very good at Ferrari, and here he is doing a very clinical job. I think it's probably the right way, but to phrase it. But right now, you'd have to say that in terms of efficient downforce, in other words, aerodynamic downforce that doesn't cause too much drag and is absolutely competitive with that of Mercedes and Red Bull, I would say Ferrari are definitely P3 at the moment now after Austria, and about the same as McLaren. Incredibly, McLaren are the big shock, really, aren't they? So, like, very good job, very good job. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Daniel Brodsky. Now looks like there's no point in pitting when the car stops on track because VSC is always one lap late. Well, yeah, everything's so slow, and this is I know you're right, and particularly the whole, you know, the Max Shunt thing. What was that all about? Single yellow, double yellow, red. And you know what this is? This is overreaction to everything that happened in Abu Dhabi 21 and installing all of the scenarios of how to react and all the simulations of the response, what to do. And of course, all that is adding time to the response in the same way that when you make a car safer, it adds weight, which you don't really want. When you're trying to do what the FIA are doing and reacting correctly to every conceivable sporting skirmish, if you start building in sims and all of the other protocols, no wonder they're taking longer to make decisions. You know, it comes back. I mean, Bernie, bless him, was right in that sense, an autocrat. And Bernie was quite capable of being a race director. That's the point, isn't it? You know, he could have been a race director. Charlie was effectively his extension, as was Herbie. And many were the days when Bernie would have been ringing Charlie and Herbie and saying, "Do this, do that, stop this," you know. But do you think, you know, does anybody do that now with the race directors? No, of course they don't. And therefore they have all these protocols. And again, there's another factor, which is that nobody wants to be seen to be making a mistake anymore. And my opinion is, be aware that everyone makes mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's the way to go into it. A, and B, particularly if it's matters of safety. In other words, there's an accident or a potential accident. err on the side of getting it wrong, but overreact to everything would be my way of trying to make everybody work in harmony. But they're not doing that, and it's completely ridiculous. And I'm still awaiting the statement about what they're going to do about the yellow flag rule now, because quite clearly Austria showed that it needs to be much more detailed and more precisely worded. And anyway, why was it shown? Why was there a single yellow? Was it a mistake? Was it just finger trouble? Did George benefit just from a marshal getting it wrong, or an official getting it wrong, pressing the wrong button? Who knows? Daniel again, why did teams keep trophies? Was there any driver who didn't sign contract like that and wanted to keep original trophies? Well, it kind of depends on, yeah, many differences between drivers and teams over the years. And it depends on the strength of your position when you're signing your contract with the team. And generally speaking, there's a driver's trophy and there's a constructor's trophy if you win a race or you're on the podium, say. And so if you've just negotiated a massive retainer, it behoves the team principal to say, well, you got all the money now, we're going to keep all the trophies, for example, or vice versa. And so every situation is unique. A bit of a problem is when it's a challenger trophy and you have to hand it back at the end of the year. And well, certainly in Carlos's case and a couple of Nigel's cases, I had to go out and get the replicas made, and that was okay. But it costs money, obviously, and who pays for that? That's never in the contract. I think the team probably loves to have as many trophies as it possibly can have in some huge cabinet in their lobby of their building, don't they, for people to impress people? Whereas drivers tend to hide everything away, or Nicky Lauda's case, fill it with water and let the dog drink out of the trophy, which is probably good use of the trophy, actually. I mean, Dexter, I think, would be quite happy to. He's down here somewhere. He'd be quite happy to drink out of the British Grand Prix trophy. No problem at all. Well, probably a bit high for him, I think. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, trophies. I mean, not all trophies today are very nice, are they? That trophy needs to be a proper cup, I think, in some description. Okay, I love the Australian Grand Prix one, the Jack Brabham Cooper steering wheel. That's nice. And there's a few other things, but some of them are so way out. They just try to be so different in what they're doing, and they just go so far out on a limb that you think it's a piece of glass, really? Give me a break. Anyway, is this my opportunity to say, bring back garlands? We had them for a while on these sprint races. What's happened to the garland? I thought it was a great thing. And it got completely overshadowed by the medal, which is stupid. Forget the medals, bring back garlands and proper trophies, I think. I heard some drivers get to keep replicas. Well, that's right. Yeah, they do. But usually, in my experience, the driver has to go and get the replicas made and do a deal. I remember having a long, sort of 6-month drama with Neil Easton Gibson, lovely guy at the BRDC, about Carlos's 78 British Grand Prix trophy and how Carlos wanted to get an exact replica. I mean, this had to be right and that had to be right. And Neil was so accommodating. He was just brilliant. Lovely. Very funny. He was a big Carlos fan too. This is 78, obviously, when he won at Brands. And we did get it from a silversmith, did it down in Hatton Garden somewhere in London. And when I gave it to Carlos, we were in the Zia Teresa Italian restaurant by Basil Street near the Capitol Hotel in London, near Harrods. And I had it in a box. I said, here you go, Carlos. What is this, Windsor? And he looked at it. He said, it's Brands Hatch, Bruno Giacomelli. Of course, Bruno was the guy he passed when he got Nicky to take the lead. So that was a nice moment. I think we had very nice pasta that day. The only Chris Welch. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. I just had goosebumps of Hamilton and Verstappen rolling back the years on track. Yeah. Well, they've just been doing something today. By the way, speaking of stuff that happens away from Grand Prix, did you see? I'm waiting for somebody to say, Peter, you're amazing. I can't believe how you predict these things. Did you not see? Did everybody see that when no one else was talking about him? I did that interview with Nirei Fukuzumi, the Japanese driver who raced Formula 3 with Jack Aitken and George Russell, and then went back to Japan, didn't do that much. And I'm all excited about him because he's driving the single car rookie team entry owned by Mr. Toyota in the Super Formula, and he won at Suzuka recently. And on the back of that, he was out doing demos in the Haas F1 car, as I kind of predicted in the interview, that he's got a really good foothold there, potentially, as to getting into Formula One. This guy's really quick. Yeah, he wasn't much slower than George in Formula 3, believe me. And Formula 2 wasn't great, but it was more the team than anything else. And he's very good. So yeah, I don't know how we got onto that, but anyway, just wanted to mention that. Um, the battle was awesome, but to watch between Max and Lewis. It was between Max and Lewis. That was, that was very 2021 Abu Dhabi cameo revisited, wasn't it? And it was, I love that moment when Max just, when he got in front of Lewis, he just sort of drove him slightly to the right just to show who was boss. And fair enough. I think they're both having a smile at that point. And I'm sure, Max was over the top, wasn't he? Saying, "Oh, he's driven me off the road." Yeah, yeah, right, Max. Come on. Max didn't need to go that wide and throw up dust the way he did. He just did that just to be annoying. So it was good fun. And I thought Max versus Kimi as well was two titans, really brilliant. No mistakes from Max. I mean, that was the other impressive thing in the closing laps. Kimi's tires are a bit younger than Max's, and Max just absolutely perfect on everything he was doing under pressure. That's why I say, for him to finish second, I don't think they were thinking about the win at Red Bull. And there was too much of a question mark if you put the mediums on. Hurricane, okay, one. Peter, what's in store for Arvid after he's disobeying team orders like that? Has Alan Permain mellowed out since 2013? Oh, to be a fly on the wall on that team debrief. Um, I think he'll be fine. I don't think he needs to worry about anything. He just goes to Red Bull and his mates and says, "Nah, it's all right." I'm, does it really matter? I think just shows that he's got great grit and he's a good bloke, and I respect him for that, actually. I think if it's the lead, it's a slightly different thing, because that sort of thing should be sorted out before the start of a race. But where they are, fair enough. I really rate Arvid. I hadn't seen much of him before this season, obviously just watching him from afar in F2, but looking at his driving now, this guy's really good, really, really good. And that needs to be borne in mind. Has Alan Permain mellowed out? I always found him to be a pretty mellow guy, actually. A lot more mellow than, say, Jonathan Wheatley, who can be, pretty. Whenever I go to chat to Jonathan Wheatley, I kind of feel as if I have to have every question in my mind that I'm going to ask him. It has to be intelligent, and I always feel a little bit like I'm outside the headmaster's study. But when I'm talking to Alan Permain, nah, I know I'm not going to get very long, in-depth answers from Alan, because he's that sort of guy. He isn't going to give too much away, but yeah, I think Alan's a good bloke, good guy for both of them, really. Yeah, well, there you go. Mad Dragon, great pick. Yeah, well, that's Jim Clark, Lotus 49. Let's do another one of that. Yeah, good, isn't it? Amazing. But don't look at the helmet peak. Yeah, very good. Now I've lost the box doing that. Where's that gone? Excuse me. Chat box. I knew it'd be fatal if I did something like that. Okay, here we go. Yeah, great pick there. So the only car that has ever kept up with me through a corner was a Lotus. Yeah, well, there's no surprise, is it? What was Colin Chapman's philosophy? Low center of gravity, lightweight, stiff chassis. Hard to beat that, really. I don't see how any of the large SUVs that are dominating the world and ruining the world's roads and the ozone layer comply with any of Colin Chapman's prescriptions. What do they think at night? The owners of these huge SUVs, I'm not talking about electric ones now, but I kind of am, because they're so heavy. Or B, the manufacturers of these SUVs, what do they think at night when they obviously, as we all do, we think about Colin and what he did for motorsport and for automotive engineering in general. How do they square their SUV with Colin? Sachin. Hi, Peter. A bit worried about Charles' situation. Wondering if his management is adept enough to help him navigate the politics of Ferrari. 8 years and he doesn't look any closer to a team leader. Well, the problem is not that he's not a team leader. The problem is that he's not getting the best from the car at the moment. And that's So the question to ask is his team adept enough to keep him on the straight and narrow when he hasn't, when he's in a bit of a weird situation with his driving? And my answer is I don't think the team is adept enough to do that. I think they're all about politics and money, his management team. And they probably do quite a good job. And politically, they're probably doing quite a good job behind the scenes at Ferrari right now. But Charles' problem is not that. Charles' problem is how to do a better job in the cockpit. And that's where I don't think his management team are helping him. And I think a good management team should be able to help. I think there are too many management teams with drivers that do focus exclusively on the political and commercial side of racing, and they assume that the rest of it, the engineering and the driving, is handled by the team. Well, that's, as hopefully many might have heard me say over the years on these streams and so forth, that is very, very naive thinking, because most engineers don't think about the driving. They just assume the drivers are all the same and they're going to get the best from the car, providing they give them a decent car. And that's the biggest problem that Charles has right now, is how to develop his driving in an environment where Lewis is doing a better job as a racing driver. And we're in new regulations that nobody properly understands, but Lewis has done a very good job of working with. And he's now changed the brakes, which is a fundamental part of his platform. He's trying to get used to that, as well as do all the things that Lewis is doing. So he's actually complicated his problem by changing the brakes, in my opinion. And that's where the management could easily have come in and said, no, 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 don't do that. Just stay calm, believe in yourself, trust yourself. I know you don't watch cricket, but trust us when we tell you that the way to do this is exactly what Steve Waugh would do. Oh, Steve Waugh, captain of the Australian cricket team, who just always said, trust yourself, back yourself. And that's what you need to do, Charles. You've got it. You've got the talent. You've got the softness of touch. What you need to do now is reapply that to what these cars need. And what these cars need is what Lewis is doing. But don't lose what you have when you go down that path. That's what the management team should be saying to him. And I bet they're not. I bet they're saying, oh, you know, bank account just went up here, but do you want us to buy these shares there? What are you doing about your helmet color design for the Italian Grand Prix? Blah, blah, blah. You know, we got a phone call from Toto Wolff, where all that stuff. None of it's important in terms of what Charles needs to be focusing on right now. The only Chris Welch. Yeah, I think you've asked some good questions as well into the only Chris Welch. I see Piastri leaving McLaren, but I don't see if he's going to Red Bull. If he goes anywhere, likely to be Aston Martin, with Alonso looking way out of Aston Martin. What do you think, Peter? Well, what I think is, what was it all about in that case? You know, is Piastri thinking of leaving, or are McLaren thinking of leaving Piastri? Don't forget, 2 years ago, it was, oh, no, you know, we know it's a bit dodgy with this whole Alpine thing. We've got to have Piastri. He's much better than Daniel Ricciardo. And now what? Now what are they saying about Piastri? Or now is what Piastri is saying about McLaren? My whole point back then was that if he'd stayed at Alpine and held his nose for a year, which he would have done because he didn't want to be there, he didn't like the people quite clearly, and he didn't want to be at Alpine, he would have blown Esteban Ocon into the weeds. And he would have got, in my opinion, he would have got either a Ferrari or a Mercedes offer, or maybe even a McLaren offer at the end of that year. And Daniel Ricciardo would have stayed and done another year with Lando Norris. And he would be probably in Kimi Antonelli's car now, or maybe a Ferrari alongside Charles. As a result of which, no, got to go to McLaren, much better team than Alpine, without thinking medium term at all. And now look what's happening. The McLaren, as predicted, is not as good this year as it was last year, when everyone was saying, oh, well, Lando wins this year, Oscar can win it the following year. Yeah, go for it, Oscar. You know, the car's not a championship winning car, quite clearly. And now everyone's saying, oh, well, you know, Oscar's going to leave McLaren. Where's he going to go? He's not going to go to Red Bull, in my opinion. They've got too many good drivers already at Red Bull, lining up to go. Lindblad being a good example. And if you're Red Bull right now, would you say you'd put all your faith in Oscar Piastri rather than Arvid Lindblad? I doubt it very much. And, or indeed Isaac Ajar for that matter. Maybe it's, oh, well, the experience. Okay. Maybe you'd run Piastri alongside Hadjar if Max leaves. Maybe. But then be a lot of people pushing for Lindblad, I would have thought. But even then, is that going to be a great drive for him? Does that put him in a much better situation than if he'd stayed at Alpine and gone to Mercedes or Ferrari? No. And exactly what I was saying would happen seems to be happening. I hope I'm wrong, because actually I'm a big Oscar fan, as you probably know. You know, he's an Aussie apart from anything else, and I like his laconic approach. But I just don't see. I mean, we're talking about management then. Where's his short corner driving gone? Where's all that gone? Where's that lovely soft touch he had? Where's that all gone? Yeah, it's not bad now, but it's not it's not Isaac Hajar even really to watch him on the track. Anyway, what you're saying, he might go to Aston Martin. Well, why would the only reason that Aston Martin exists is so that Lance Stroll has got a Grand Prix drive. So what are you saying? We've got Piastri and Stroll. Maybe. Maybe. I mean, where they are doesn't really matter that much, does it? Because the damage is so bad now that I guess it's not going to be just an easy fix even this year, let alone be up and running as a front running car in 2027. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, that's a possibility. But from Oscar's point of view, I don't know. It's a mess. And it just shows if you play with things, you play with fire, and you go against the flow of life. And the flow of life was Alpine gave him a good opportunity with testing and stuff, not always perfect, but not bad. And then declared him a race driver, officially declared him the race driver. And you just walk away from that because there's something better around the corner. That's against the flow of life. And that's what we're seeing. It's a bit like Daniel Ricciardo going against the flow of life and leaving Red Bull when he did. He's a very, very good race team that he'd spent his entire life trying to drive for. And he walks away from it because he doesn't like the way he thinks Max Verstappen's being treated compared with his treatment. It's wrong. Peter Adi Matteo, do you know Petra G. Cristea, a Romanian driver that won the 36 Monte Carlo rally? Uh, I know of Kay Petra, the lady driver who was quite successful at Brooklands. Not sure I'm massively on au fait with Petra Cristea, but I will go away after this live stream and I will immediately try and do some research on the 36 Monte Carlo rally. I'm sure it was an amazing event. I imagine most of the drivers were probably wearing bow ties and dinner jackets during the rally, were they? The only Chris Welch. If Piastri does leave McLaren, who would you see replacing him? Bortoletto, maybe, as Alonso's his manager. Yeah, I'm a Fornaroli fan. Isn't that why McLaren have hired him as a third driver or whatever? Why would you not give Fornaroli a chance? I think he's really good. So, but maybe I'm too logical there. And, oh no, you can't do that. It's too easy. Bit like Frank saying, "Oh no, I can't sign Mike Webber now. He's only just won the Formula Ford Festival. Why would I want him now?" You know. But Frank, you get him now, 10-year contract, pay him nothing. He'll drive for nothing. Just help him find some sponsors for his F3 season, and Bob's your uncle. He'll be in Formula One in a couple of years. No, that'll never work. So I don't know. This will be a good test actually of how McLaren do treat their young academy drivers, because they've got a guy there who's never been given a chance. And well, he's been given a chance with McLaren, but he's not racing or anything, is he? So I'd love to see him in the car. I would think he's at least as good as Bortoletto myself. HB, not that I'm against Bortoletto. I think he's very, very good as well. Another great talent. Greetings, Mr. Windsor. Lots of love and blessings. Thank you very much. Did you follow the 24-hour Spa? I started watching endurance recently, though gutted for my countryman Arjun Maini. The Ford Mustang looks stronger too. Well, I didn't, but you're telling me that Arjun had a bad result or an unlucky result, and I feel very bad about that because he's a mate of mine as well. I say a mate. I got to know him quite well when he was in doing Formula 3 and winning the odd race or two, and like him very much, as I do his brother Kush. And if he had a bad luck run there, that's a great shame because they're both very talented, the Mainis, and Kush is doing a great job in F2, I think. Very good. He's not slow at all, is he? And Arjun was never slow either. They're both really good. Anyway, thanks for that one. Ajem Peretev. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. I'm very interested to know what your favorite track on the calendar and which one you would get rid of and which you can bring back. What's not on the calendar currently? Favorite track on the calendar would still be Suzuka. I just love the combination of corners there, the variety of corners, the undulations, and the layout in general. John Hugenholtz at his very best. Which one would I get rid of? Vegas, probably. No, I probably that. What is that? Saudi Arabia, probably one of those. Yeah, one of those triple DRS things with ridiculously fast straights and some blind corners. I think it is Saudi Arabia, isn't it? With all those blind fast corners there with a guardrail either side. I don't like that track at all. And which one would I bring back? Yeah, good question. I've often said I miss Sepang a lot. That's the Malaysian Grand Prix circuit. I think that was Tilke's best design. I think it was his first. It was his first design, '99, and I love that circuit. A little bit like the reason I like Suzuka, although it's dead flat. Lots of great corners, lots of combination of corners, and great combinations, and a long lap too. I think long laps are nice. So that Turkey I liked as well. I think that's a good circuit. Very nice. Um, yeah, there'd be the two at the top of my list to bring back. I think if we could get one of those two back on the calendar, it would be excellent. But I don't think that'll happen, will it? Malaysia. I don't know why Malaysia's not on the calendar. It's Petronas, all that stuff. You imagine there's a massive amount of money from the government there to sort of fight the Singapore Grand Prix and to have that race, but not. The Ford PU is fast. Well, yeah, good. I'm glad people are starting to realize that. But if I'd said that last year, well, I did say that last year many times. I thought that that engine would be a fast, good engine because of the good people there. And it is technology is about people as much as it is anything else. Everybody scoffed. No way. What's Windsor thinking about? What did I tell you? Not sure about the electrics at the moment, but I certainly think Phil Prue and the boys have done a brilliant job, and girls, on the internal combustion engine. Sam Dragon, race control, fell asleep in Austria and should have red flagged the session. Of course they should have. It's just like, you know, uh, there are I don't even know how to respond to that really, because ultimately, yes, total red flag immediately. And if you're going to put a yellow out, why put a single yellow out? I mean, 300 kilometers an hour shunt. What are you thinking? Anyway, yeah, terrible. But we won't get any explanations or apologies, I don't think. Extreme. Yeah, thank you very much as joining as a member. Very kind, brilliant. We're going to try and do the best ever live chat during the race from Silverstone. Probably be total chaos, but this time I think I've got my technology sorted. I've now got all three computers. We're going to have all three computers hardwired, and no excuses. He says, Shakaka 12, Peter. It's Shaq Marriott. Do you remember? I was the first one to tell you about Kimi when he was just going into Frecker. It was Austria that weekend. I told you he was the next Max and future World Drivers' Champion. I do remember, and I did actually watch that race in Austria. And he didn't do that well in that race. He was just sort of, I don't know, he just didn't look that quick. But on the back of that, I did actually immediately go to Merck and thank you very much for all your recommendations. I did go to Merck and say I'd love to just chat with Kimi for 10 minutes just to sort of get to know him and just have a very quick chat. Nothing serious at all. And I was told he was much too busy. His schedule was absolutely tight. He had no gaps in it whatsoever. Wasn't doing any interviews. Go away. So actually then I went to Singapore not long after that. And I bumped into Toto and I said, Toto, I was a bit surprised. I just wanted to have a quick chat to Kimi, just get to know him a bit. And he said, oh yeah, it'd be really good. I said, well, I was told by his management team that he was much too busy, had no slots. And he said, oh, that can't be right. No, let me sort that out. Nothing about him. Anyway, there you go. No, I'm sure it's not Kimi's fault at all, but it just shows. That's why I kind of lose interest in even pursuing these things, because I just don't want to waste time dealing with all these people. I'm not talking about Toto now in general, but just people in general who just think they're much too busy. No, he's too busy. We're all too busy. As if they're the only people busy in this planet Earth, Uh, right. Nick Woodbridge. Hi, Peter. Not that I hate Max. I love him. But do you think if Kimi keeps progressing, he will surpass Max? you know, it's just as records are there to be broken, drivers like Max are there to be beaten. And right now, Kimi is doing nothing to show that one day he may not even be better than Max. Because in every dimension of a racing driver's development, he's doing well, whether it be developing his skill across the spectrum of corners that we have in Formula One, whether it be keeping a cool head on his shoulders, working with the engineers, working with his team of people on his side of the garage, getting the best from the car, whether it is taking the race to George Russell, who's one of the hardest races in Formula One in the history of the sport. He's still there, you know, quite, he's Nigel Mansell-esque audacity to be able to match George with racecraft and often surpass him with racecraft. And as we saw in Austria, as I was just saying earlier, a sort of Senna-like approach to, in an imaginative way, making sure he stays out of trouble in the first few laps of the race, and probably doing quite a lot of homework in a way that drivers don't. Yeah, they do the track walk, but what do they actually learn in the track walk? And that's another skill that he's developing. Plus, he's come into the planet Earth just when the whole regs have changed, and because he's young and he's computer literate, all of that stuff is like, you know, easy for him. And he's with a very good team that'll bring the best out in him, won't allow things to get away from him. He's got a very good family behind him, by the look of it, who keep him on the straight and narrow, even though he's an Italian who's, you know, doing more for Italian success in Formula One than anybody in recent history. And we know what the Italians are like in terms of their fervor. He's doing all these things, and he's got a smile on his face, and he's just Kimi Antonelli. I'm absolutely staggered at how good he is. Staggered's the wrong word. I'm completely bowled over, really. I mean, that's a nicer way of phrasing it, because I love watching him drive, and I love the way he goes through a weekend. And he's with a great engineer as well. You know, anybody better than Bono out there? Well, I suppose, you know, GP's good, isn't he? But he's up there. But Bono's as good as it gets. He couldn't be in a better situation. And it's just a pleasure to watch him. So put all those things together, and he stays in a front-running team, whether it be Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari over the next 15 years. Can he be more successful? How would you measure if he was better than Max? I mean, probably the only way you could measure it would be his success. So, so every chance, I would say, that he could do that. Amazing. And it's something to, you know, really savor this year. We're seeing this guy blossoming alongside George and how good he is. Even though I think gut feeling George is still going to win the championship, I have to add. But you know my reasons now for saying that. Marvin, to me, the first thing he said as he slowed down and lost about a tenth, that he shows he wanted his lap regardless of safety. What are we talking here? We're talking about, to me, the fact that the first thing he said was, I slowed down and lost about a tenth, shows he just wanted his lap regardless. We're talking about George there. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just, yeah, as I said to Cameron, I don't think if there'd been no yellows at all, and the FIA were even more asleep than they were, and Kimi had gone over that blind or approached there and seen dust and stuff, I think he would have come right out of it and probably braked anyway. And I'm staggered that George didn't do that, think the same way. Absolutely staggered, because he didn't know. They didn't get on the radio to him. All he would have seen is just a yellow, single yellow, and that was it. You know, and to me, what Kimi did was completely natural. I'm not going to be able to get through all the questions again, guys. Sorry about this. Here's another super chat. Who's better? This is from Deb Maffeo. Who's better, Lewis Hamilton or AF? I'm being stupid here. Who's AF? I don't know. Who's AF? Sorry. I'll come back to that one. I'll have to think about who AF is. Throw some names up in front of me. F. You don't mean Fernando Alonso, I suppose, do you? That's not a miss thing, is it? Let me just see. I'll just go through some things here, which is names F. I don't know. Sorry. I'll come back to that one, or maybe you can explain it again in another question. Max Flashart says, when? Max, by the way, you should know that I've got a new store and the t-shirts are there. Make corners great again, thanks to you. And they're all they can be bought in all sorts of different garments, hoodies, tees, this, that. So have a look. I've got another one that says make corners great again. 60/40 is not enough. Might be another t-shirt you want to buy. The actual store's not on my channel at the moment, but if you go to my community page within my channel, I've got the link there, and within a couple of weeks we'll have the store on show in the channel as well. I'm with a new clothing company, so have a look at that. And again, thank you very much, Max, for the whole idea. No one thought that could happen for a reason. Yeah, exactly. Quite sure what that means, but anyway. Super ferocious ninja warrior. Hi, Peter. You're a gem of a bloke. Oh, thank you very much. Your manners are top notch. You're well informed. You're an excellent communicator. Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I'll send you the bill later. I mean, I'll send you the money later. The bills, the bill fold. Garlands are great. Yeah, bring back garlands, definitely. That was, Aussie girl here. Oh, she's an Aussie girl. Good on you. Great. Yep. Well, we love Oscar, we love Daniel, we love Mark, and I always had a laugh with AJ and Jack Brabham. I used to know pretty well. Frank Gardner, one of my mates actually. Love Frank Gardner. Paul Hawkins, spoke to him once, and lots of other Aussies I've known over the years as well. Hundreds of them, all racers, all of them racers. In fact, there's a picture my mate Alan Gow sent of. It's the same AI people that did that picture of Jim Clark in the Lotus 49. They also sent a picture of Kevin Bartlett redone in the Mildren Alpha GTA, GTV, I think it was. Look at that. I don't know if you can see it well. It's a similar opposite lock. Why is it not? Why is it out of focus? Sorry, can't get it. Oh, there you go. Yeah, you can see it's sharp now. Anyway, he's less opposite lock than Jimmy, but KB. And actually on that one, I managed to get it wrong because if you look at the close up, in their version there, he's bare knuckled and he's not wearing gloves. I thought, really? Is that right? And of course, you look at the original picture and he's wearing what I thought he was wearing, which is white Nomex gauntlet gloves. But they've made him barehanded in that AI. Can you post the link? I missed it. I will, except I actually don't have it right in front of me. Typical. I will put it in the description below this video. Might even be there already. I'm not sure. But if it's not, go to community in my YouTube channel, the community tab. And I use that as X, as I used to use X and Twitter. I put a lot of stuff up there, sunsets and pictures of Dexter and comments about Jim Clark. They're all there. Plus this thing about I've got a new store. So as I say, it's just a link at the moment, but I will have the store on the channel. So go to channel, but I will put it in the description as well. Jason says, is this season one of the most unpredictable in recent years, or is it just hype? After each qualifying race, Formula One pundits claim a different team and driver will end up on. Yeah, well, first thing is forget about the pundits, probably, including me. But yeah, obviously somebody asked me in a live stream at the start of the year, did I think that they would make any adjustments to the technical regulations once the year had started? And I said, no, of course not. What did I know? And now we've had all these changes. And that, for one reason, that's one of the reasons things are unpredictable. Because Mercedes engine that we have now is not the same Mercedes engine we had at the start of the year, which may be another reason the McLarens aren't as good either. Interesting point. And then on top of that, there's this whole complicated business of the new regulations, and that's brought a level of unreliability in that we haven't had for quite a while. So that's another reason things are turned on their head. Thirdly, some of the teams and drivers just are doing a better job of managing the harnessing of power and deployment of power than others, and that will change and morph as the season develops. So that's another reason that we have a lot of variety. And fourthly, we've not yet had these races, any of these new cars in the wet properly or in different enough variables. And that will also be a bigger shake-up than normal, I suspect. So it's not hype, really. I think, it could be a very, I think Mercedes are going to win it. I think because they've got the best basic car, and that usually is rule of thumb. That is the team that's going to be best positioned to win the championship. They can do more with their car, given all these different variables. And yep, the reliability of the Merc didn't look at all bad in Austria, although whether after a spate of failures, you could say after the next race in which there are none, oh, well, they've got it sorted now. That's not necessarily the conclusion you can draw straight away. But yeah, I mean, in theory, reliability for Merc is not bad now. Ferrari, I think they've got a better power unit now. They had at the start of the year. That has an effect. But there are other things going on there that we've talked about. Red Bull getting better in theory now with every race, so that's good. And McLaren, in theory, getting worse with every race by the look of it. McLaren will be back. McLaren will have a good car sooner rather than later, probably. But bear in mind they may well have been hurt also by well, they will for sure have been hurt by the compression ratio rule change, being a Mercedes customer team. Incongruent tart you are. Would Max ever be annoying? No, I don't think he would actually. I think yeah, but he is. He is just a funny bloke. Arvid will be okay, says Max. Yeah, of course he would. Arvid just racing like his mentor, Roland. He's going to be a proper elbows out racer. Oh, I didn't know his mentor was Roland. He's a good bloke, isn't he, Roland? Very good. I was so impressed with him once. I was watching him on a sim at the racing car show, the Autosport show. I videoed the whole thing. Just his inputs were so good. Oliver Rowland, really good. Very soft inputs. Lovely driver. Yep. Well, that explains quite a lot. Mega. And if you've seen that video out there, you probably have with Arvid and Max doing a range of Ford cars on a sort of airfield somewhere. And I don't know, Arvid drives it pretty well, doesn't he? Gets in that old GT40 Mark II. Does a good job with it. I like him. Max won't get the first stop favour from Liam again to counter the undercut from Gabby. No, I mean, all that stuff's nonsense. I think the teams should stop doing that and just focus on the drivers should do their own thing. Obviously, you don't want them coming in the same lap, but all this business of expecting two young guys to start giving positions back and everything is just crazy, in my opinion. Go racing. And Anonym says, let's be grateful for Sir Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, definitely. What a star. What a driver. After all these years, he's there. There'll be a lot of shouting and screaming for George because he's just won Austria, and Lando they'll love, and Oliver Behrman, the future, and this and that, and Arvid. They're all good guys. But Lewis Hamilton, wow. What a perennial star. And in my opinion, gentlemen, I think he's a really good bloke, a sportsman, athlete, without any peer in many ways, given his global platform and how motivated he still is. Great guy. Back in my yard says, I lost all respect for Colin Chapman when he cheered and threw his cap in the air at Watkins Glen 73. They only won because the Tyrrell withdrew. Very disrespectful from Chapman there. Shame. Really? 73 after Francois' accident. Yeah, yeah, you're right. But I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? When you think about those days and how terrible it was, did you lose respect for Keke Rosberg when, after Gilles Villeneuve's accident at Zolder, he was the first guy out on track, ready to carry on qualifying? It's and saying, when does practice restart? I was there, and unfortunately, and it seems totally inconceivable today, But unfortunately, when things like Francois' accident happened in Formula One, the only way we had to cope with it was to look ahead and think about when is practice going to restart, or when is the next race, or what's happening tomorrow in the race. That was a defense mechanism that everybody had in Formula One, because if you sat down and thought about it too much, you'd never ever get in a race car again, and you'd never work with a race team again. It was too violent, and it was too obviously in your face. And and so, yeah, I mean, Colin Chapman was no different from everybody of that era. And, where do you draw the line on that? Do you draw the line at the Dutch Grand Prix 73 when Roger Williamson's car's upside down on fire and only David Purley stops to try to help him and get out of there, and everybody else drives past at slow speed? Nobody stops to help. Is that as bad, worse than Colin Chapman throwing his cap in the air after the race at the Glen in 73? I think it was that era. Yeah, it's inconceivable today, and Colin Chapman today wouldn't do that same thing for sure. But this was 73. And I hate to say it, things like that happened often. Look, I've just talked about two drivers that were killed that year, and there were others as well. And, you know, I think you have to see it like that. Sadly, it was just a different time, different approach. And as when I was talking to Alan Stacey Jr. about his uncle's accident and the era in which Alan Stacey Sr. raced, he made the point quite correctly. It wasn't that long after World War II, and everybody was used to losing people. Everyone was used to young people dying young, and terrible to think about it today, but I take your point. Max Flashout, I would trust an IT manager to watching test cricket and be on to work more than someone on site. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think referring to the FIA being slow, and maybe they should be remote and therefore would be faster. I don't know. Maybe that. Just on that point though, the delay, the lag, one thing that has shown up with these live chats I'm doing during the race is that, because obviously I'm streaming everything, I tend to be about 40 seconds, would you believe, behind those who are watching it via satellite. And so therefore, there's nothing I can do about that. A and B, one way, of course, is to delay your feed by 40 seconds if you want my comments to be in sync with with what you're watching. Just wanted to say that. I'll mention it again at some point. Jason, if Kimi ends up winning the championship this year, where would you place him amongst recent champions and drivers? Oh, right up there with the very, very best, with Max, with Michael, with Jimmy, with Jackie Stewart, with, you know, anybody of that ilk. Because what if he was, if he had, I don't know, as much as I'm a Frederick Vesti fan, but if he was in the other car, you wouldn't be as excited about it as beating George. And if you're beating a guy like George Russell in an equal car, maybe slightly more than equal, bearing in mind his stature in the team and his experience and his road dust, as I talked about earlier, and Kimi ends up beating that, I mean, that is as good as it gets. That is as good as it gets. That's the toughest opposition you can have as a Grand Prix driver, is a driver as good as George Russell in the other car. Talk to Lewis Hamilton about that, you know, and that's why he would be absolutely right up there with the very best. He is anyway, whether he wins, loses, or draws, to be honest, because he's almost done enough. Debbie says Alonso needs to retire. When was his last podium? Well, yeah, you could ask that. I mean, you could also ask, when was the last time he was in a car capable of finishing on the podium, which is a more appropriate question. You could ask, when was the last time he drove that Aston Martin absolutely on the limit, as fast as it could possibly go, even though he was 4 seconds off the pace? Probably last race. He's probably still as good as he ever was, and you can't just judge Fernando by his results when he was driving for Renault or McLaren, or Ferrari, because he's in an Aston Martin Honda now, which is as bad as it gets. Havish Chandra, any whispers from the top brass hit reset on this hydraulic BS. World Cup predictions and favorite player. Been a fun exercise drawing parallels like Mbappe is Max in my head. Wonder what you think. Um, no word from the powers that be other than that they're going to carry on this boring old path of trying to get back to 60-40 by 2028. Ooh, talk about boring. I'm hoping that the FIA president will start to stir things up a bit. I don't have my great hopes for that, but let's hope it happens. And I'm going to really disappoint you and say that I absolutely have no understanding or interest in the World Cup. I'm not a soccer guy. That's all I can say. And my wife is. She's Colombian, and of course she's up at 4 every morning watching every match, glued to a seat. And Dexter gets up too. And when they score a goal, he goes out barking in the garden in celebration with her. But I'm usually in bed at that point. Well, always in bed at that point. So sadly, I can't answer your question really. I could draw parallels with golfers, and I'm quite interested to see what happens in the British Open, or the Open as it's correctly named. But soccer, no. Wow, thank you very much. There's a very, very nice super chat here from Coding Guy. Love your informative videos. Just something for refreshments during the race. Thank you very much. That's very kind, and I will spend the money well. Be sure of that. Right, just trying to see if there's any other super chats I've missed. Alonso to retire. Oh, poor Fernando. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think from another perspective, if you were Fernando Alonso, you'd think, I've had enough of this. Got enough money in the bank. I'm out of here. But equally, he must wake up every morning thinking, nah, it's a newie car. One day it's just I'm going to get in this car and I'm going to be on the pole without driving any differently. Isn't that what gets him out of bed in the mornings? The only Chris Welch says Leclerc is going down blind alley at the moment, needs better management to help develop his driving, as he said. Yeah, well, that isn't going to happen, sadly, with the management team he's got. It will happen if Rob Wilson does a few days with him, but I doubt that his management team would even know who Rob Wilson was. So there you go. The only Chris says again, completely agree, Peter. I said that last week about this whole fantasy driver pairing. It always ends in tears for number one driver. Unfortunately, that's where we're heading now. Yeah, there's a surplus of talent. That's why there's so many good young drivers out there and not enough seats that inevitably you'll see more and more pairings that will end in tears. And that's the way of the world, isn't it? I don't see it, says Hadjo. Even assuming Lewis doesn't go to Ferrari or stay at Ferrari, I don't think they'd get rid of Carlos Sainz for Oscar. Mercedes has Kimi, and Toto was trying to get Max. Also, no room for Oscar. Yeah, I mean, Oscar at the moment, you'd never replace Carlos Sainz with Oscar unless Carlos left to go somewhere else of his own volition. And you'd never replace Lewis with Oscar. Which is sad. As I say, 2 years ago, he was flavour of the month, wasn't he? Everybody loved Oscar Piastri. How brilliant he was. And what a great move it was to go to McLaren. Unbelievable move. Wow. Brilliant. Um, so, so Max says, I would take Piastri over Arvid and Hajar. Yeah, well, he's definitely a lot more experience for what that's worth. And he's got a lovely approach. I love watching. Actually, I like watching Piastri speak more than I like watching him drive. To be honest, he comes over really well. I think I love that. I keep using the word laconic because I can't think of any other way to describe it. That laconic Australian approach is great. I'm just so frustrated that he hasn't developed more as a driver, as a short corner driver. Bearing in mind that he definitely had the talent, displayed that he had the talent a couple of years ago. And as I say, I think he's got completely sidetracked and misled by having to study so closely the telemetry of Lando. Steve still plays games. Says regarding Oscar, I cannot help but think McLaren totally crushed his spirit in 25, and he's not been the same since. Maybe it was Singapore, when they just crushed his spirit, and he's not been the same since. But he's a tough Aussie. That shouldn't keep you down. Maybe a race or two max. And he did come back, didn't he? Where was it? Qatar. I think he was pretty good. And and then he had the winter to go surfing and enjoy life and come back fresh and blow Lando away and win the championship for McLaren. Not happening. It's more worrying when he gets beaten by Lando. I mean, Austria is about what you'd expect, Lando having won the championship, where they should be at every race, with Oscar crushing Lando. But that's not happening either, is it? This is Max. When I was saying, if we owned a Formula One team like Aston, and he's saying, well, if only I own Red Bull. Yeah, I know, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? Incongruent Tart says Formula One is going against the flow of life. Yeah, well, I think it is. I think that's absolutely true. Chris Welch, Lindblad and Hajars, that's the future partnership after Max does eventually decide to leave. Tasty partnership as well. Yeah, Lindblad, Hajar, that is a good team. Very good team, in my opinion. Right. What are we looking here? Eileen Beardsley. I don't see Oscar leaving McLaren at all. Why would he? He's got a huge pay rise last year, for one thing. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think unless McLaren are going cold on him, which is always a possibility, the rumor is that they've been talking a little bit to Max. Um, there's no reason from Oscar's point of view that he'd want to leave McLaren, because what would be better than where he is? So I think he needs to just make sure he keeps that drive, in my opinion. That's the way I would handle it. Resi Bro says, thanks very much, mate, from New Zealand. Very kind. Super chat. Bit off topic. My dad was saying to me I should have a look into a guy called Frank Matic, Aussie driver in the 60s and 70s. Did you know much about him? Are you kidding me? Frank Matic is one of the greatest racing drivers I've ever seen, certainly I've ever known, and one of the most untapped talents of all time. I once did a video with Ian Titchmarsh, and it was a great video. I love doing it, in which we put together a starting grid of all the great drivers who never got a chance in Formula One. And Frank Matic was on the pole. I think it was certainly on the front row. Frank Matic was incredibly fast, very good driver engineer. I mean, Bruce McLaren used to ring Frank regularly to get his input on various things. Frank discovered the power of Repco before Jack Brabham, and it was Frank's Repco rods that Frank commandeered after the 64 Tasman series, and so on. He created his own cars. He was incredibly quick in Elfins and Lotuses and Formula Juniors before he went into big sports cars. And in one epic race at Warwick Farm in '68, in his own built Matic SR3 Can-Am car, he blew away Chris Amon in the David Mackay Works Ferrari 330 P4 Spider around Warwick Farm, which is quite a tight circuit, which should have been perfect for the Spider. That's how good Frank was. But this is how good Frank was. 1965 Tasman race at Lakeside, which oddly wasn't a round of the Tasman series, didn't count for points. So there weren't that many of the regular runners in it. But Jim Clark was in it in his championship winning Lotus 32B Climax. And Frank Matic was in it in his total race team Brabham Climax. And there was a lot of talk about, could anybody break the 55-second barrier around Lakeside? It was quite a short lap, as you obviously gathered, and nobody did in qualifying. And from memory, Jimmy was on the pole. Maybe Frank was alongside him within a tenth or two. Anyway, they set off in the race, and they were dicing quite closely. Jimmy was in front, then Frank for a couple of laps, and then Frank had a problem. The engine started misfiring, came into the pits, and they changed the distributor rotor button on the engine very quickly. Actually, very good team. Frank had sent him out again, but he was a lap behind now, and he went out and he rejoined where Jimmy was on the racetrack. And for the rest of the race, they were absolutely wheel to wheel, swapping positions virtually by the lap. And they went down to 54.9, lapping faster in the race than they had in qualifying. They both did 54.9. And Jimmy won the race. And afterwards, Jimmy made sure that Frank was on the podium and held his hand and said, it's one of the best races I've ever had. This guy is unbelievable. And there was a twist to the tale, because after the podium ceremony, Jimmy had, as he did, he had half a tin of Foster's that somebody had given him, ice cold Foster's out of the esky, and just drank a couple of things. And the next thing we know, he's getting deleted from the results for drinking alcohol in the pits at Lakeside, even though it's after the race and everybody's packing up to go home. And who goes to the stewards to fight for Jimmy to make sure he's reinstated as the winner? Frank Maddich. And they became close buddies after that. And every time Jimmy came out for the Tasman, he always used to go and stay with Frank, or hang out with Frank anyway, not necessarily stay with him, but hang out with him. They go water skiing together, all sorts of things. And they were just, Frank Maddich to me is one of the great racing drivers. And here's another one, 63 German Grand Prix, when Bruce McLaren had a big shunt in the Cooper. He drove out there with Frank Maddich, and I think Denny Hulme, maybe Ian Young even, in an Austin Rapier. It was a very new model at the time, from England to Germany in a Rapier. And that was because Frank was in England going to the Brabham factory to buy a Brabham to race in the Tasman and to build that Brabham with under Ron Toronak's, eye. And he was just one of the boys. And he was sleeping on the floor at Bruce's flat in Surbiton at the time. So he went over to the German Grand Prix to help with the driving of the road car and just generally help Bruce in the pits. And when Bruce had the accident, he drove Bruce back from the Nürburgring to England in the Rapier with Bruce on the back seat. Can you imagine that? Frank Maddich, Bruce McLaren. And yeah, it's just absolute star, Frank. And I always think about him every day because one of the first drivers that really captured my imagination in the total racing team, Lotus 19, Elfin 1.5, Elfin Formula Junior, Elfin Clubman, and later the Brabham. And I was talking to Jack the other day about Total and what a great company they were, great sponsor, great motor racing sponsor, blue, white, and red, just that lovely stripe they had. In Frank's case, on the light blue Brabham or the red Elfin, Leo Gagan's case, Ian Gagan's against the black. Total racing team. And there's Total today. It's called Total Energy or something, completely different logo. They don't respect the Total racing team as it was in Australia all those years ago. And there's no heritage there at all. It's such a shame. One of the great race teams, Total Racing Team, and Frank Maddich, one of the great racing drivers. Thank you for that question. Everybody must think I just planted that, but your dad's 100% right, Rezi. Thanks so much, mate. What a great question. So lots of questions. We're nearly out of time though. Byri Shivisia. Should Ferrari build the car around Lewis's feedback over Charles or too soon? If Lewis holds form and Charles keeps struggling, should they commit to his style after the summer break? They never commit to styles of drivers when designing and building a car. That's never a factor because the engineers don't really spend any time thinking there's any style difference anyway. As I've said many times, all they're interested in is if you're an aerodynamicist, it's downforce, it's cheap downforce. In other words, downforce with no drag or as little drag as you can get. If you're a suspension designer, stiffness for weight. If you're a chassis designer, weight for crash testing, don't make it too heavy in order to pass the crash test and so forth. Everybody has their own little goals. And that car comes out. Obviously, there's a chief designer who's making sure it's basically as he wants it to be front to rear, weight distribution wise, etc. But they never think, oh, this car's going to be perfect for an early turn in, or this car's perfect for a late turn in. They never think that. And so they don't need to set the car up around Charles or Lewis. All I'm saying is, at the moment, the way you have to harvest and deploy the energy, Lewis is doing a much better job than Charles Leclerc. And Leclerc is trying to do that. But I think I think he made a mistake changing the brakes. And I think he's finding it difficult to drive like Lewis without becoming more spiky. If he can drive like Lewis and be supple and smooth in the way that he normally is, then he's cracked it. That's what he's got to work on. It shouldn't be that difficult, to be honest. Dexter, what a legend. Yeah, well, not quite sure what he's doing at the moment. He seems to he's sneaked out the door. He's found a way of opening the door now. It's quite impressive. Um, he is brilliant though, Dexter. I had him out last night. I was out walking him at 11 o'clock at night under the new moon around the golf course, and I had a green sort of fluorescent collar around him and his black dog, and all I could see was just this green thing running around. And then I saw somebody in the distance. I thought, Dex, come on, kid, quickly. And he just ran straight to me, sat down, waited for me to put the thing on again. Brilliant. I think we might have lost everything again. If you can still hear me, brilliant. If not, I think we have to end it there because the box has just gone down again. Let me just have a look. Reload. It's telling me to reload. It's telling me to reload and do the box thing. We're going to pop chat, pop out chat. Here we go. It's twice it's happened now. It's unusual because recently it hasn't been happening. So sorry, I'll just do this again. I have to reload it. And you probably see me stalling for a few minutes. It's just the internet. I don't know why it's doing that. Normally it's very good. Probably running all the AC that we're running at the moment may be an issue. Where are we? Browser. Okay, I think we're back in business now. So Rezi says, sounds like I need to apologize for my ignorance. Amazing. Thanks for the chat about Frank Maddich. You're the reason I'm getting into the history behind what we see today. Thanks for your wealth of knowledge. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's very kind. Very sweet messages from all of you. And I suppose, oh, hang on, does Formula One glamorize? This is a good question from Theodopoulos. Does Formula One glamorize tax evasion? Shouldn't drivers be paying income tax to their nations, or should they all be racing under the Monaco flag? I'm not going to go near that one. I'm surprised you're just competing it to the drivers. What about all the teams? Don't say that, Peter. Max says, if you are a Kiwi or an Aussie, if you live overseas, people will end up sleeping on your sofa, spare room or garage. Well, exactly. That is Frank Maddich. Anyway, so Mike Tyson says, as he would, I think Formula One's becoming too soft, and now MotoGP is much better with close racing. Are Liberty destroying the spirit of Formula One? Well, I'm not sure that's the case. For me, anyway, there's no relationship to MotoGP and Formula One. And just because people are Formula One fans doesn't mean they're going to be MotoGP fans any more than it means, even though the Americans seem to deny this, that if you're a golfing fan, you want to watch American football. So, you know, what can I say? I don't think Formula One is getting too soft, really. Have you read my questions, Peter? Says Jules Clark. I don't think I have. I'm just going to flash through and see if I can see Jules Clark. Connor Clark says Max is right-handed, right-handed and left-footed. Per you talking about drivers that are left-footed. Yeah, yeah, that's right. But it still would be quite good to get his opinion about that. What are we doing here? I'm just running for Jules Clark. Actually, did I get your questions? I got that one asking if I got your questions, but I actually got your questions. Sorry about that. So I'm just reading a few of your questions. And I'm actually looking for Jules Clark. Because I hate it when people hate it. I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable when people are asking questions and I don't give them a chance. Arjun's car was running top three at night, but later got a drive through and ultimately a DNF. Nice, interesting strategies over there, endurance racing. Good. In Brennan Harvey, in your opinion, which current Formula One driver best suits the 26 cars and why? Um, well, it's difficult to generalize because every car team seems to be different in the problems they're having. So it's kind of difficult to say. But right now, I would say Lewis seems to have got pretty much the right balance between what he's very good at doing in the cockpit and what he needs to do out of it. But and again, for sure, Kimi Antonelli has, and for sure, George is pretty much on top of it. So yeah, it's difficult to generalize that because they're all very different. Even a McLaren Mercedes is different from a factory Mercedes in terms of what the drivers have to do. So yeah. Theodopoulos says, Peter, I like your idea of recreating a lost circuit in the Nevada desert. What is your favorite flat circuit that has no elevation changes? Buenos Aires, Adelaide, the English airfields. Yeah, well, I love Buenos Aires, Parque Almirante Brown. That was partly for the atmosphere, really, I guess. But it was a great circuit as well. I love those corners after the pits, the left right-hander, sorry, the right left-hander, the curve-on at the top end of the circuit. Then you come back to the infield again. It had everything, the hairpin and the atmosphere and the town, Buenos Aires, just wonderful, the whole thing. Adelaide was great too, a real street race around a wonderful city, just the right size. Everything was perfect until Formula One outgrew it, became too fat and heavy. but Adelaide remained cool. The English airfields, yeah. I always preferred Brands to Silverstone, to be honest. So, and Donington too, really. But more Brands. I was always a Brands guy. Quite sure why. But I love Brands. Um, Ronnie, do you think Red Bull harvesting of energy will be better in fast-flowing Silverstone given their updated car? I've no idea. I wish I could answer questions like that. I have no idea what it takes to have really efficient harvesting. I just don't know. It's so foreign to me and everything I've ever done in racing. I just don't know. We will see. I'm assuming it will be, but who knows? So I'm just still trying to look for these pictures. I can't see any from our friend, so I'm sorry about that. But please don't give up. Have you any thoughts about Dino Beganovic and his future? I was a bit disappointed with these very wide entries and stuff. I mean, isn't he a Jock Clear guy? He grew. I know Jock's not there any now, but I mean, Jock's been pretty much over his shoulder for the last few years, I think. And you'd imagine from Jock he would have got a little bit more softer and rounder with his approaches. I'm trying to be a fan, but I was a bit surprised the way he was driving Austria in that Ferrari, to be honest. Maybe we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I can't see any more questions for you there, mate. So I'm going to have to admit defeat there. There's another super chat. Max moving to Merck with Kimi could be like Alonso in '07. Kimi is loved there and Max won't get Red Bull style priority treatment. Is that what the problem was with Alonso? I don't think it was. Problem with Alonso, he didn't brake from high speed as well as Lewis Hamilton. And then he insisted on having Hitco brakes instead of the Carbon Industries. And it worked well for him, as we saw, for example, at Monza. But by then the damage was done and the whole thing was driven apart. And then they went into Spygate. I don't think that would happen at Mercedes if Max went there. And I don't think everyone would think, oh, we love Kimi, oh, Max. I think they think, wow, we got Max here. Isn't this mega? I think it would work well, actually. I think Kimi would love it. And probably Max would love it. First time in his life he's had to have somebody that good in the other car, in a car that good. So, yeah, I think that would happen. So I hope I've covered all the super chats, everybody. Probably haven't. And I'm sorry for those that I didn't manage to get through to, but we have had a few glitches with the software as well, haven't we? Maybe internet related. EDBR, Peter, could you be able to give a bit of a background history in and around your Formula One racing? I always enjoy your insight. Well, yeah, I'm just like everybody else here, really. I think I'm just a fan. I just grew up loving racing and wanting to be a part of it and working in it. Didn't always want to be a racing driver, obviously, like everybody else. But I was lucky enough to be raised in Australia, where I was able to work at the Australian Automobile Racing Club under Jeff Sykes and do all sorts of things, test cars, the Formula Vs we had at the time, for example, and to see all the drivers close up and get to know the people running the racing at Warwick Farm, become a flag marshal quite early on. I was quite young. I think I was 14 when I started. And then I became the press officer at Warwick Farm, and then journalism, and got to know drivers, manage teams, writing TV. I've been very lucky and try to do something different every year so it doesn't get too, predictable, and try to put myself under pressure and try different new things, all this technology, which I keep getting wrong. But we're getting there, I think, hopefully. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell, but obviously lots of stories to tell, but that's another video series probably. So yeah, I think I need to, Max, it does help when you Peter Windsor question, so Peter can actually see questions versus general chat. Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of chat going on. Intra viewer chat. I still need Peter to do that interview with Cam Waters from V8 Supercars. Yeah, yeah. I actually got into a chat with Cam about when we were going to do it. I think he realized that coordinating with somebody living in Spain was going to be quite difficult for his sleeping cycle and vice versa. So it hasn't got much further than that. But we'll keep working on Cam. I'd love to do something with Cam. Good man, good driver. Audio and video okay. Well, that's good. Thank you very much, Max. Yeah, in the right place, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, enough of all this. Got to stop now, guys. I've got to go to, got various things to do. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you so much to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, TrackNinja, REC watches, which I love, and some new REC products coming out soon. So we'll watch for those. And I'll put the link to the store where you can buy your t-shirts below this video. Make sure you got that. So thanks, everyone, and see you on Friday when I do the video from the first day of the British Grand Prix. Who knows what's going to happen? Let's wait and see. Take care.